someone else. Not really much different action in the ring. Cause broken bones on a concrete floor, I really love his thing. He's not on the team, I remember the game. He's Cactus Jack, or better known as Mr. Bang Bang. He's as strange as a man can be. He ain't got no family. A long career is not expected. But he really doesn't care when he's in the circle square. He knows he'll soon end up rejected. He's not on the team, I remember the game. He's Cactus Jack, or better known as Mr. Bang Bang.
And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer and the hardcore legend, Mr. Mick Foley. Mick, how are you, man?
I am doing great. Sorry about that burp. That's from Zoa.
Coming in hot.
Coming in hot, brother. Love me some Zoa energy drink, but only one per show. Very rarely do I have an energy drink during a regular day, but I think our audience they deserve to see the amped up Foley.
I'm for it.
Yeah.
I want to put a bug in everybody's ear that we recorded last week's episode with me not really knowing what you did or didn't want to talk about with all the WWE news.
Yeah.
And in between episodes, you said, hey, man, are we not going to talk about? So let's talk about it.
I think you have to. I mean, our show is a stroll down memory lane.
It is.
And I have said, hey, a lot of people are offering the same tour.
Yes.
It's just a matter of who you feel comfortable with as your tour guide.
There you go.
And so I'm really very thankful for everyone who chooses to have me take them on this stroll down memory lane. But I think when something is this big, I think we should touch on these things. So
let's talk about it. You know, there's lots of, as you and I are recording this, there's lots of uncertainty in wrestling right now because the news is out. Vince McMahon is coming back to WWE. He had abandoned ship, and now he's coming back. He's ousted 3 board members, made room for himself, George and Michelle, his former leadership group, and they're now back as board members. He plans to be the executive chairman or whatever his title is, and boy, there's lots of nervousness out there.
It's the second shortest retirement in WWE history.
You guys are in a race.
Following only mine, which lasted for 6 weeks. Hey, look, I mean, you probably know Vince very well by extension through your relationship with JR, doing Grilling JR. JR's got probably, and with Bruce, right? Nobody spent as much time over the decades as those two guys. And I know JR had told me years ago that he was worried for Vince in retirement because JR's, it's safe to say JR's a workaholic is there is a negative connotation because you apply so much of yourself to working. But even JR's he's got the Oklahoma football.
He's got stuff.
He has stuff that he loves in his life. And I don't think Vince loves his family unconditionally.
Of course.
But I'm talking about hobbies.
No.
You know, there's no golfing. There's none of the things you usually associate with men of his age. No scrapbooking for Vince, right? No bird watching. Like, his business was very, very personal. Like, his life revolved and his family revolved around the business. So that was one of my concerns is what is he going to do? What is he going to do? He loves working. I can't imagine him not being, not being there in that gorilla position. I just, it would seem like something was amiss if he wasn't there behind it. With that being said, I think the company's has been in a really good direction. There's a reason why Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett changed up the book every 6 months.
Yes.
Whether it was needed or not, it was a pair of fresh ears and eyes on the product, and they all put their own stamps on it. And I think Hunter has had a chance to do that, and it's a really fun show with a lot of improvements made. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be there. This is family, and now it's become competition. So I don't know. It sounds like it has the possibility of getting ugly. I feel for Vince, and I care very much about Vince as a person. I've had my ups and downs with him over the years. But that's been largely business. Always respected him, always genuinely liked him, and I want to make sure that this guy who meant so much to my life is happy.
Yes.
Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I was given the Iggy a few months ago that something might be happening, and now it's happening. It's going to be interesting, for sure. But Vince coming around with you're talking about a guy who literally single-handedly stole last year's Mania with the stunner for the ages.
Sorry, Stone Cold.
Sorry, Steve. Steve was surprised that I said that his match was my favorite match of the night. Of the weekend.
Yes.
I thought that Austin and
Kevin Owens tore it up.
It over-delivered in every way imaginable, and it would be really a difficult time of the year. I mean, Vince has got 2 children, but WrestleMania is his 3rd baby, right? It's his. I can't imagine the loneliness, that he must feel not having that company. So it will be really interesting. I want what's best for the company, what's best for the individuals involved, and that might not be, might not be possible for everyone to come out happy.
I think it's going to be possible. I mean, I know that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of folks who are nervous, but if he has more invested than anyone else, and I don't think it's unrealistic or unreasonable to think that he would want to be involved in media rights talks or sale talks.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who are saying, hey, this could be a way for him to take the company private or for him to sell it to this company or that company. And I guess he's apparently enlisted the help of JP Morgan to at least start the sale talks. It's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. But I, for one, don't necessarily expect major changes right away. It's just my gut feeling. What say you?
I don't know. I don't know. He's Vince.
Yeah.
It's in his nature to shake things up.
It is.
Right? I mean, it's in his Vince. It may not have been the most efficient way to write a show and to perform a show where a gentleman takes a Sharpie through 6 days of hard work.
Correct.
But I believe that's how Vince feels he works best.
Yes.
Under pressure. That's his way of doing things. I think he loves the idea of shaking things up so that he can thrive. I don't know if that means he would shake things up after the Rumble, before Mania, or wait until afterwards, but it's going to be interesting for sure.
It's amazing to see how the stock market even responded to the news.
How did they respond?
In the 5 days after, it was up 27.78%.
Wow.
So to go up 27% in just a handful of days is remarkable, and we'll see how it shakes out. I, for one, am excited for what the future looks like, and a lot of people have thought WWE was developing a sense of sameness for a while. Well, that feels like that's out the window right now. Yeah. So be careful what you wish for.
I think the only thing that topped that.
Let's speaking of Blade Men, let's talk about one of our favorites.
Oh, one of the best, brother.
Abdullah the Butcher. Nobody could bleed like this man. He just celebrated a birthday not too many days ago, January 11th, 1941, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Who would have ever thought Abdullah the Butcher's real name?
Larry Shreve.
Doesn't seem like a Larry.
Doesn't strike me as Larry. He is. I remember getting on board with Abdullah and his plane tickets before September 11th, 2001. His tickets, A. Butcher. A Butcher, sometimes Abdullah Butcher.
I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, one of the great heels and characters in our business. Guy got over everywhere he went, and never got to accomplish his one goal of wrestling at Madison Square Garden.
That was his goal.
Yeah, that was his goal. And I pitched Abdullah. I think it was for that 98 or the one in the Garden. So that would have been.
Oh, for WrestleMania, you're saying?
For
or Royal Rumble.
Royal Rumble.
Okay.
I pitched him. Where was the 2000? Where was the 98 Rumble?
San Jose.
When was all right? So the 2000. When
2000 was in Madison Square Garden.
I pitched Abdullah, feeling like he would be a draw. I actually showed Vince the Battle Bowl.
Well, hang on. It was you and Triple H there in 2000. What would you have wanted Abdullah to do?
I wanted for him to make that dream come true.
Just be on the show.
That it was the Rumble, that it was the Garden, that Abdullah's active days, were winding down. And we had a chance to not only make this dream come true for Abdullah, but also to have this entity who'd never been in WWE, who could do things beyond, the barbaric, because he could be funny. I teamed up enough with him to know that he could inject a little humor, and the spot I'm going to bring up is Battle Bowl WCW, I think 92, which was at Dusty Rhodes. The idea was you have different WCW superstars or Marcus
drawn
Bagwell.
out of a raffle.
Yeah. You didn't, no pop? WCW superstars and Marcus Bagwell?
Oh, Lord.
Okay. There you go.
I love that works for Miz or Bagwell, and you get it every time. With a locker room full of WWE superstars and the Miz. That's fantastic.
So in this case, I was teamed up with Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker.
Yes.
Abdullah can't figure out, storyline-wise, why he's separated from his real partner.
Yes.
And his rationale is, what if I beat the living tar out of Buddy Lee Parker backstage? And then he comes out, and he's got the facial expressions, and he's working the Shakespeare and the pantomime. It's me and you now. He has to be escorted to the back. I can't remember. And then Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker does the slow crawl while I work a match against Ricky Steamboat and Private Todd Champion, 2-on-1, and when Buddy finally makes it back, he gets beaten in rapid fashion. But a great display of fortitude on Buddy's part, but it was also giving Vince the idea of how this guy could make a splash, as much of a splash as someone can make when they have never been in that ring before. But I would say, I thought he would be a genuine attraction for the Rumble at the Garden, where he always wanted to wrestle. I thought it was a win-win situation. He never got to do that, but he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame.
I'm glad he's in the WWE Hall of Fame. He, I can't believe this is real, but he turns 82 this month.
82.
He started wrestling when he was just 17 years old in 1958. So when you first meet him in WCW in 1990, he's a 32-year vet, my man.
Mm-hmm.
He had wrestled everyone in those 30-plus years. Gene Kiniski, Stu Hart, Hulk Hogan, Dusty Rhodes, Bruiser Brody. You even wrote in your book, as a freshman in college, I taped a picture of Abdullah to my wall, and by the end of the year, had everyone in Fitzgerald Hall believing that Abdullah the Butcher was my father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Strange when you consider that Abby was a 400-pound black man whose grooves carved into his head so deep that he could flip out people in casinos by inserting gambling chips into them.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I did. I showed up as a freshman, taped that photo of the wall. I still remember what I had on my wall. I had an American flag. I had a poster of Clint Eastwood from Joe Kidd, a poster of Candace Loving, who was the 25th anniversary Playboy Playmate, in a one piece, not in the nude. And then I had a photo of Abdullah the Butcher. And I just told that same fib for so long it became part of accepted history. Abdullah the Butcher was my father, and I was his adopted son.
Just had to Google Candace Loving, sorry. Yeah, check that out. Be right back. All right, got it.
There you go.
Let's move on. Let's talk about when you first meet Abdullah the Butcher, when you first see Abdullah the Butcher. What's your first memory, not necessarily of meeting him, but just seeing him? Is it from the magazines back in the day?
Magazines.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that time, 83, WWF took over the time slot of what had been Southwest Championship Wrestling on USA. And they started, it was like a a news magazine type of thing where you'd see clips of wrestling from other areas. We didn't know at the time that was Vince's way of introducing people to new stars and then grabbing them. I can't tell you for a fact that Abdullah was ever on that show. I think it was mainly the magazines that built him up so much. And then in '85, when I started setting up rings for Tommy D Promotions, Abdullah headlined a weekend against Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant. So the idea of seeing an all-out bloodbath on an independent show was completely new to me.
Yes.
Like the old idea of fighting all around the building. Tommy D thought it was the best thing he'd ever seen in all his years of promoting. It was surreal to me, for me to see a guy who I had claimed was my adoptive dad in the flesh, like tearing it down in front of 600-700 people and doing it all over again the next night.
It's amazing that Abdullah the Butcher entertained so many people, worked literally everywhere against so many opponents, and as you said, never wrestled at Madison Square Garden, never was the world champion, or really even positioned to be the top guy. He was the special attraction.
He was. He would come into a territory for 3-4 months at a time, help set it on fire, build up a sense of urgency with whatever babyface he was doing battle with. It didn't have to be for a title. It shouldn't have even been for a title.
He wasn't fighting for belts. He's fighting for blood.
Yeah, fighting for blood. And this is one of the things I think is missing from the current product, is the sense that somebody is fighting for their life. That he was that. We see shades of it. But it's a different atmosphere, different time. When he came in, he was the guy among 3 or 4 people unique to the business where you would turn to your friend and go, all right, I know what most of that is, but this is real.
That guy's evil.
This is real. Those other matches, maybe they're not, but him fighting for his life against Tommy Rich and the Omni, he was great with these super over baby faces, and he could sell out arenas without the belt hanging in the balance.
When you say, one of maybe 3 guys, are the other 2 the Sheik and Bruiser Brody, or is there someone else?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. And I think at other times the Mongolian Stomper would go into Calgary and wreak havoc, and he did that all around. But I would say those are the 3 guys. Sheik not as much because he tended to stay in his territory. But Brody and Abdullah went all over the country and all over the world, just creating mayhem.
What was it, do you think, about Abby that the Japanese people gravitated to?
I mean, there was that real life aura of danger because he was one of another handful of people for whom the crowd parted, because if they did not, they would get hurt.
Yes.
Brody, it was with the chain, and Abdullah, people would get cut. Like, they had to get out of the way. It was a different idea where nobody was lining up with a lawyer. They were all kind of willingly playing their role as extras in a horror movie. But there was a genuine sense of fear, even though I think Meltzer would say that the look on people's faces when they were being chased by Brody and Abdullah was different than the faces of the young female fans being chased by Dump Matsumoto, and that it was a little more real because of the youthful nature of the All Japan women's fans as opposed to the All Japan men's fans. But they knew whether they thought he was 100% evil or not. They knew if they weren't running, they were going to get hit, and that was an accepted fact.
His matches with Terry Funk in Japan are legendary, and I've seen before that Terry even talks about one of the best 3 matches of his career being against Abdullah the Butcher.
Really?
Which is kind of hard to imagine, because when you think about Abdullah the Butcher, you do think of a spectacle more so than a traditional competitive match.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you, man, the storytelling is where the money is in wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, Abdullah was a guy who would go head-to-head with Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah was a guy who would go head-to-head with Andre the Giant and have people expect or at least believe that this guy was a credible threat to Andre.
Yeah.
He was a credible threat to everyone.
Absolutely.
Everyone. Even in 1990, when I started working with him, there was an ominous nature to Abdullah the Butcher, like you didn't know. you weren't sure. And it goes back again to, okay, Johnny, I know the rest of that wrestling is whatever it is, but this guy's real. And I wanted a little piece of that for myself, inspired by guys like Abdullah and Brody. And I've said in my live shows, and I probably said here, that I wanted to be a cross between Brody and a Dynamite Kid. The brawling nature of Brody and the Tommy Billington's willingness to use his own body as a weapon. So Bill Goldberg would say, I want to be one part John Matuzak, great Oakland Raiders lineman with a very outgoing personality, and an MMA fighter. And then you sprinkle your own magic onto that, your own seasonings, and you make it your own. So I don't think anyone looked at me when I was, the scarier Cactus Jack, early 90s through mid 90s, and said, he's blatantly ripping off Terry Funk, even though we eventually all do, if you're in that brawling thing. But there are little elements of Brody and Funk and Abdullah the Butcher, although I was never as scary as any of those guys, but because I had that other element of the wildness with the style, I was able to make my own mark as well.
Everyone watching this considers you to be, I shouldn't say everyone, most everyone watching this considers you to be the nicest man in wrestling. And it's so crazy to imagine. But I remember, I was a fan. I was watching that you were this crazed maniac, murderous, evil figure. But in reality, the nicest guy. I mean, for goodness sake, we've spent the better part of the last month just talking about your love of Santa Claus.
Yeah.
That's not the type of character we would expect you to play. But even in this room, there's pictures of you covered in blood and just psycho stuff.
I'm really proud. I'm looking now at the Japanese deathmatch shirt. I was so proud of the fact that when my wife took my two younger boys to Raw, that they were both wearing Foley shirts. And Huey, my youngest, he was wearing the deathmatch shirt.
That's awesome.
And I was really proud of that. I had to turn that amplifier up, right? So I know that people aren't interested, by and large, about the Santa stuff, except when it comes to December. But that was a character I was portraying that I put the same amount of love and attention to detail. But whereas Cactus Jack and Mankind especially was darker than Cactus was, but Cactus Jack, I had to become wilder, more aggressive. I'm not aggressive by nature. That was one of my major stumbling blocks, is that I had to find a way to create aggression, because without the aggression, none of the bumps I had lined up would pay off the way they would if I could be a more formidable and vicious heel. So that was always an uphill climb for me. But the same way that I had to create more aggression, more darkness for those characters, when it came to Santa, I had to find a way to become more gentle, more patient, more understanding. So it's on one level, I was never those guys, but they were a part of me, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I don't want to sound like I'm putting too much. Like, if you're a non-wrestling fan, this sounds like a ridiculous.
No, it's effort and detail, attention to detail, and a character.
Effort and attention to detail. And back then, when you were still, holding on to kayfabe to the point where I had a girlfriend for 6 months in the world-class territory who never knew my real name.
Yeah.
Never saw me when I wasn't at least partially in character. And this is a lesson I learned from Abdullah, even though it wouldn't come along until 2 years after I left World Class, is that Abdullah would be in character a lot of the time he was in public. So a flight attendant comes by and he's like, and Abdullah started shaking and his eyes were bugging out, and the woman comes over and just, flight attendant scurries off. And he's like, gotta keep the gimmick going, champ, So that at that time you built a gimmick by creating grassroots word of mouth. Believability everywhere you went. And as strange, even when I was writing Have a Nice Day, some of that stuff seemed really outdated. But at the same time, you had to appreciate the lengths that at that time it was largely the men were willing to go to create the believability in those characters.
I just find it fascinating, the dichotomy, for lack of a better word, of trying to balance these two characters as a fan, because we know who you really are now.
Yeah.
And I've often heard, almost as like a tongue-in-cheek thing, people say, well, in wrestling, the bad guys are really good guys, and the good guys are really bad guys. But most of us who are listening to this, we don't know Abdullah the Butcher.
Right.
But we know that the character you portrayed, for lack of a better word, was the villain in a horror movie.
Yeah.
And Abdullah the Butcher, much the same. But we don't really know Larry. Was he a good dude? Like the way people talk about the opposite?
Yes, he was. I think there's really something to, because the baby face and heels, everyone does turns. But I think there's something to be said for those men and women who begin as heels and they apply their craft as heels because they don't buy into the adulation. So they don't buy into the idea that here's a guy who's had 3 months of training and now he's signing autographs.
Yes.
And he's selling photos, because back then, if you could pick up an extra $50 to $100 selling photos, you were doubling or tripling your payoff. So even in the Memphis territory, the baby faces did photos, heels did not. Every once in a while, you'd have a baby face who'd come over with a little bit of money and just said, hey, I want to thank you for helping me get over. But that was rare. It was just accepted that being a heel meant there'd be no merchandise money. And I think that you learn to be humble because you didn't buy into being someone who you were not, even though you would later buy into it almost out of necessity, because if you weren't living the gimmick to some extent, you probably weren't doing it right on screen.
Right.
And there's a fine line between putting everything you have into the character and becoming the character. I don't think I ever did, but I'm sure, if you were my girlfriend in 1989, you were getting half Cactus Jack, half Mick Foley, and you didn't know where one began and one ended, or even that Cactus Jack had the name Mick Foley.
So let's talk about 1990. There's a short feud between Sullivan's Slaughterhouse of Kevin Sullivan, yourself, and Bam Bam Bigelow versus Norman the Lunatic, Captain Mike Rotunda, and Abdullah the Butcher. And it all starts when Rotunda defeats the Cuban Assassin in a TV match on WCW at the end of March. You and Sullivan then run out after Captain Mike, and Sullivan tears open a mysterious black box at ringside, and inside the box is Abdullah the Butcher. And he destroys you and Sullivan, throwing you all around ringside, hitting you with any object he can find. Is this your first time meeting him? WCW?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I wrestled with Joel Goodhart, but that was after leaving. I wrestled against Abdullah for Joel Goodhart's Tri-State Wrestling, but that was after WCW. The cool thing, this is an extension of the feud with Mike Rotunda.
Yes.
So I'm so proud of the fact that I feuded with Bray Wyatt's dad.
That's pretty
right?
Fun.
It's pretty cool. This is that amazing Cornette Sullivan underneath angle where they have me turning on my tag team partners.
Yes.
It gets to a point where I can't find someone to tag with me. Mike Rotundo is asked whether he'd be willing to do it. He does it. I turn on Mike. So now I'm not turning on a Nasty Ned Brady, with all due respect to Nasty Ned, who had some of the greatest facial expressions for any, underneath. I think Ned's willing to, underneath talent's not a derogatory way. These are guys who do favors, make us look good.
Yes.
And Ned did a great job doing that, but I'm no longer facing Nasty Ned or turning on Nasty Ned. I'm now turning on, or Lee Scott, don't want to leave Lee Scott out of the equation, but now I'm turning on Captain Mike Rotundo, so we go into a singles feud, which now extends. I become part of Sullivan's Slaughterhouse. Buzz Sawyer breaks his wrist in graphic fashion on live TV on Clash of the Champions. I don't know if Bam Bam was officially part of the Slaughterhouse or whether he and Humperdinck were working in cahoots with me and Kevin. But they did Mike unleashed Abdullah the Butcher. And brother, it's been said numerous times about it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Yes.
But there's just something about Abdullah the Butcher. Now he's a babyface. The exact same guy he is as a heel, but he's doing it to heels. And when they say we're taking bumps everywhere, I think that mainly means I was taking bumps.
Yes.
But Kevin's putting over his offense in Kevin's own unique way. And we've got a cool little thing going on, a cool short-term but fun and explosive little angle going on.
The famous wrestler in a box. We've heard Jim Cornette say it for years. Anybody who comes out of a box is instantly over.
We talked about Terry Funk last week. A year later, I would be coming out of a box to jumpstart, a big push with WCW. And Abdullah the Butcher coming out of the box was pretty special.
It leads to a handful of tag team and six-man tags on TV and the house shows. They're all wild brawls that end in non-finishes. And Abby's out of WCW by the end of April 1990, and you, in fact, are gone by mid-June in 90. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any memories that stand out during those matches?
Well, it's a tackle, shoulder tackle is such an elementary move in the ring, but when you're doing it on the concrete, people, they hear it, they hear that thud, boom, boom, and there's no way to disguise that. So that was one of the big bumps, even though it was really elementary, just taking night in, night out, house shows and TV, those type of bumps, it made the matches stand out. So as a heel, I love the idea of super selling for somebody like Abdullah the Butcher, who was a babyface in heel's clothing.
You returned to WCW in August of 91. Abby is in almost immediately afterwards. And on the August 24th edition of WCW, they show Sting receiving a large box wrapped up as a gift, supposedly from a fan. Sting opens it, and out pops Abdullah. When are we going to stop opening boxes here at WCW? You wrote in your book, Abdullah the Butcher, my opponent from a year earlier, was another of the wrestlers brought in to quote-unquote feed Sting. With the success of Cactus Jack, the feeding angle was stopped. Dusty decided to team me up with Abdullah the Butcher, and Abby was one of the great monsters in the business. In real life, Abby was a sharp businessman and an even sharper dresser who now owns and operates Abdullah's House of Ribs in Atlanta. He chewed unlit cigars and spoke with a surprisingly high voice and was a man with such class that he once held in a fart
for 300 miles. 300 or more?
200.
200, okay.
As to not offend my wife who was traveling with me.
Yeah. He got out of the car and he was like, champ, I was holding that fart in for 200 miles. That's a classy man.
Was it a big one?
I think it was I believe it was a one cheek sneak.
Oh, it's SBD.
Yes.
Silent but deadly.
But I was just really grateful that he felt that way. And you could tell I was comfortable with Abby because he was on a road trip, with me and my wife, The Abby connection was great because you usually had to have 3 people in order to have the WCW paid for the rental cars.
Oh, wow.
And you couldn't usually get a Cadillac. But because I had Abdullah, who had narcolepsy, would fall asleep on longer drives, like we basically rode by ourselves. For a while, we rode with Brian Knighton is his real name, Axel Rotten. We rode with him a little bit, or he rode with us a little bit. But it was basically me and Abby on our own with the caddies, which I haven't rented in couple decades,
And that was just part of his WCW deal?
Just part of the deal that I was allowed to do that and submit it, and that we were given that little exemption because he was Abdullah the Butcher.
Yeah, a large man.
Yeah.
You mentioned that he's a sharp dresser, has a high-pitched voice, and a classy man. Sharp dresser like Michael Hayes sharp dresser?
No, I mean, I would say his dressing was a little less
over the top
than Michael's.
Okay.
Whereas Abdullah was just really beautifully tailored, stuff for big men. So Abdullah, he told me, I'm a big man. I've got to dress well. I've got to keep clean. And he did. He was, that 200 miles without letting a fart out, that's some classy stuff.
I like it.
Yeah.
I heard it briefly earlier. Do you have a Abdullah the Butcher impression?
Hey, champ. He's going to make it, champ. And I look out the window, and he's pointing to Dallas Page, DDP. And I went, Diamond Dallas Page? Because DDP was floundering, right? He was a guy who breaks in at age 37. I said, why? He goes, lives his gimmick, champ. He lives his gimmick. And Abdullah was able to see that in DDP.
Before anybody did.
Long before anybody did. Wow. I thought, well, that's a strange call. And sure enough,
it worked out.
DDP, I'd say, with all his attributes, his belief in himself was probably his primary attribute.
Chewing the unlit cigars. Did you ever see him light one?
I personally did not. I'm not saying he didn't. I don't remember Abdullah. He worked the cigar. He was a great guy to travel with. It's a shame that I've just fallen out of touch with him. I never had a falling out, but I remember him taking me to the place that we'd become Abdullah the Butcher's House of Ribs for 20 years, right? I don't think it's there anymore.
Right.
20 years or more, and he was showing me it when it was on its ground floor, and it became a really sought-after eatery. House of Ribs and Chinese food.
That's right.
That's right.
I'm curious, when it's just you and Abdullah in the car, what are you playing on the radio? What type of music does Cactus Jack and Abdullah the Butcher listen to?
This is 91. This is pre Dewey was with us, but Dewey was an infant, so I wasn't a year-round Christmas man. We would listen to stuff that was popular. I had a CD collection that Steve Austin would later say made me the guy with the worst road music in the crew. But Abdullah was open to a variety of different things. Sure, yeah.
I just imagine he, like a lot of old wrestlers, liked old country music.
He did like old country music, and he was a dessert guy. And that may have had something to do with Mrs. Foley's little boy going up from 287 to, I was probably legit 280, saying I was 287, and then I went way over 300. Partially because I was traveling with Abdullah, and partially because I was putting on that sympathy weight when my wife was pregnant with the first two kids.
So talk to me about Abdullah being a dessert guy. What was Abdullah's go-to? What do you mean?
I don't think it was one singular go-to. It would be
if it's sweet, he's into
do
it.
a little shopping, and he would pick up a pie, pecan, pumpkin, or we're on the road, more likely to order desserts than almost all the guys who were watching their figures.
Yeah.
And I just noticed a direct correlation between how thin I was and how little money I made, and that the more weight I put on, the better I was doing. Like the 220-pound Cactus Jack was sleeping in his car and eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. The 235 Cactus Jack got a full-time job in Memphis. The 260-pound Cactus Jack started getting over in world class, and now I would go on to overdo that theory. But there was a correlation between how good I looked and how well I was used, and I did better looking different, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like I couldn't do that. I looked better than the fans. I had to look different than the fans.
We've heard a lot of people say things like, business is done in the car. And we've heard people even say, you got to go to Automobile University, that sort of thinking. Were you getting wrestling advice, business advice, life advice? These car rides when you're traveling with Abdullah, you said he was a sharp businessman. Yeah. Can you elaborate on some of that?
I can. There have been a few times when I've done talks with wrestling students. What do they call it? There's a name they give it.
Seminar.
And I remember thinking, what the heck am I going to be able to talk about? And then as soon as I went out there, you couldn't shut me up. So it was like 2.5 hours where I'm not able to show moves off as much as I am, hopefully impart some wisdom on people. And one thing I tell them, almost the first thing, is one of the biggest challenges you face in this business is the ability to take in information from everywhere and then somehow filter out what does not work for you while simultaneously holding on to enough of it so that it may come back to help you at a later date.
Yes.
And so when I was traveling with Abdullah, clearly you want to be that monster heel, and you're traveling with one of the great monster heels in the history of the business. So everything he says is a valuable resource for me. But when it comes to like putting people over, leaving territories, over doing jobs, I've got to like nod my head in agreement while also thinking to myself, I don't believe that applies to me in the current age. Like, I believe that if you do your job well enough, that you can lose. Now, I'm a little different. I'm a much more of a normal-looking guy as compared to Abdullah. At that point, hair, shoulder length, not everybody and their brother had a goatee, and I was able to portray that sense of wildness to where people weren't sure where the character began and the real person ended and the character began. But I believe that I can do jobs, that I can put people over, and that if I am able to get my stuff in my way, and especially, you know, from a character-driven standpoint, I'm going to be okay. And I had some of the biggest stars in the business tell me, you're losing too often, and I respected their viewpoints, but also thought to myself, this is a new age, and I just believed that I was going to be able to get over while losing, even though I had, you know, you have to chalk up enough wins that you look like a threat. But that was the type of thing that I would listen to, that I would take in, and that I would kind of filter out what I didn't think worked for me.
At Clash of the Champions 16 on September 5th from Augusta, Georgia, Sting is wrestling Johnny B. Bad, and during the match, another large gift box is brought up and placed on the ramp. What are we doing with all these gifts? Eventually, boom, you charge through the box, knock down Bad's manager, Teddy Long. You attack the Stinger. You hit the big flying elbow from the middle turnbuckle. You're jumping over the announcers onto Sting, who's out on the floor. And this is a major moment in your career here, is it not?
It really is. So much so that I realize it's a defining moment when I'm in that box. I'm nervous as hell, and I'm saying the prayer, and I know that this one moment has the ability to change my life. I did not know going into this that I was supposed to be one of 6 or 7 guys to feed. When I say a stagnant Sting, I mean that's the way it was seen, just that the character had hit a plateau, and they were looking to feed him a handful of what we consider monster heels.
Like Hogan a few years before.
Yeah, in rapid succession. Now, Abdullah wasn't going to lose flat out, but Sting coming out on the winning end of a wild brawl by DQ was going to do more for him than, pinning just about anybody. And luckily, I guess based on what we did that night and also the chemistry that Abdullah and I had, changed their opinions so that instead of it being a 6-week run for me, it went on to be a 3-year run. And Abdullah left on his own volition over a loss at the Omni, that they wanted a loss and he didn't want to do it. A lot of credence was played to the importance of the Japanese magazines, where guys not only didn't want to lose, but didn't even want to be seen in a compromising position,
right,
which made doing business difficult. But Abdullah was a genuine legend over there. I saw guys walk out who had 1 or 2 tours a year with Japan, and that just sounded a little, that was just, to me, silly that someone would give up the potential of a full-time job to protect a spot that wasn't even that strong to begin with. I'm talking about guys, on the bottom of the card of All or New Japan tours who didn't want to do business for a national touring company like WCW or WWE.
Later in the show, the same Clash of the Champions 16, you write in your book that you were set to give your first live interview, and they're counting you down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. And Paulie Dangerously
turns to me, yep,
who's conducting the interview, and he says, "Who would have thought 2 homeboys from New York live on national television?" Yep. And then Paulie hands you the mic for your big live debut, ... I sucked.
Yeah, this is another instance where I think I may have been a little too tough on myself.
You were.
Because I think from a character-driven, first of all, I'm just learning through repetition. Not so much repetition. I'm learning more from visualization and belief in myself. And this was my method. Other people, mirrors and, looking in the mirror and cutting promos, filming themselves, which I think everybody should do, especially because the filming is so easy to do these days. But I had that ability to think of things and to try to bring them to life, and especially had the confidence to do a bunch of different things and to try out different things, which somebody could have warned me was not the safe way to go. I mean, the safe way is to think of one promo and do it over and over on your market-specific promos. But I was getting so much practice on a regular basis, and I believed in myself. But here I know I've got one of the biggest payoffs in my life, you know, that I dropped the elbow of my career, you know, on Sting.
Yes.
Now I see Logan Paul every time there's a WWE commercial doing a much better and more athletic, you know, move than I did. But at that time, 280 pounds coming off the second turnbuckle with the best elbow I've ever dropped. Maybe between that one and the one I dropped on Randy Orton at Backlash 2004. But to have a guy of Sting's magnitude selling the hell out of it,
yes.
Now we've got to pay it off. Now, there'll be people who rightfully so said you gave him his comeback on the same show. But that's just the way WCW did it. Vince sometimes didn't even want to leave a show without the babyface making some kind of a showing for himself. But I know Sting's going to come out of that box, and more so, specific to what we're doing, I believe quality was going to win out.
Yes.
And if I could put something up on the board, have two big wins in one night, it didn't matter to me that Sting had gotten his comeback. I thought people are going to want to see more of this rivalry. And it was one of the great compliments I've ever received in my life, you know, that Sting, who just a few weeks earlier had been told this guy's just here to put you over, is then saying among the nicest words I've ever heard. He just looked at me when we got to the back and he went, "You're great." And I'm getting like these, you know, I'm an emotional guy. And that was, man.
Validation you needed.
Validation, and we were off to the races after that.
So after your promo that you say sucked, you're doing your promo and saying, hey, as they wheel out yet another wrapped refrigerator box, "Oh, this is my business partner and close personal friend, Abdullah the Butcher. I think I'll give Abdullah a big Cactus Jack hug." Boom, it's Sting.
Sting, right?
That's the comeback. It's a big deal.
This is the hip toss off the ramp. It's
on the cold, hard concrete.
Cold, hard.
At 287 pounds.
Yeah.
You were right. This was a brutal move. And especially shocking in a time period when the cold, hard concrete gimmick was mine, all mine. Try taking a piece of raw liver out of your refrigerator and place it on your kitchen counter. Good. Now push it off the table and listen to it hit the kitchen floor. Good. Did you hear that sound? That was my 287 pounds and what it sounded like when it hit the cold, hard concrete. But did I stay down? As Steve Austin would say, oh, hell no. I got up and hit Stinger with a garbage can, emptied the contents. It's amazing what you pulled off here. It's a visual that we as wrestling fans had not seen a lot of. It was a level of violence, a level of realism. You sort of talked about it earlier where you would hear guys talk about other characters in wrestling say, okay, I know that match was whatever, but this. And the thing about this is this really was real. You really were landing on concrete.
Yeah.
Arn Anderson said, I know one thing. If I threw someone off the ram like that and he got up, I'd run. Dusty, you even wrote in your book, Dusty loved Bang Bang and encouraged me to use it in every promo. It was his idea to throw a birthday party for Sting, which turned out to be one of my favorite segments of the year. Do you want to take us through what that was?
Yeah. I mean, this is what Paulie would call laugh and cut them off. So, and he gives me the line that to me makes this promo, because it's two monster heels having a birthday celebration, and I'm saying happy birthday while Abdullah is eating a cake, without benefit of utensils. And it's Jim Ross giving the promo, but I've got this line where I'm going to cut them off. So it's Cactus. Now, over the years, Cactus Jack and Mankind have kind of become one and the same, where Mankind takes on some of those attributes that Cactus had. So it sounds like a little bit like 96 Mankind, but it's basically me as Cactus Jack going, happy birthday to you, bang, bang. Happy birthday to you, bang, bang. Happy birthday, dear Stinger. Happy birthday to you, bang, bang. And then JR says, that's nice, but it's not Sting's birthday. And here's the moment. Boom. Don't you think I know that? But I wasn't here for Sting's last birthday. So it's important that we celebrate Sting's last birthday now, because Sting's last birthday was Sting's last birthday. Bang, bang. And why it was such a triumph to me is that 30 seconds earlier, we're eating a birthday cake and singing a birthday song.
Yes.
And now we've struck fear into the hearts of the little Stingers. Like,
yes.
He's essentially saying Sting's going to die.
It's a horror movie.
It's a creative way of saying this guy's not going to be around long enough. And in a PG atmosphere, we're about as threatening as you can be. But I thought it was just really a gratifying time where you're seeing that a lot of the emotional investment you've put into your own character is paying off in a live setting, because you tape live to tape. And sometimes you come out after a match, you get the adrenaline flowing, and they're giving the interviews. I don't remember if we had a match or if that was when we came out and did the promo, but it was really gratifying to me to do those type of things where there was a little sense of humor to it, because I wanted people to feel for that character and then take it away from him, that I never thought, I was never, ever interested in being a heel who did things for money. To me, that was the lazy man's way out. I turned because somebody offered me money. What do you have for me next week? I like the idea that here was an unbalanced man with maybe the most unbalanced monster of them all, and they enjoy hurting you.
Yes.
That was what we were trying to get across.
Yes.
We like doing this.
Yes.
And to me, that bat's been taken out of the hand of almost every, current day wrestler, because especially in WWE, Mr. McMahon decided there should be a pinfall attempt after every major move. But there's nothing ominous or scary about a guy trying to win a match. That's a noble ambition. To fight, struggle to be the best is a noble ambition. Putting someone on their back for 3 seconds is not admirable. Putting somebody on a hospital gurney is. And I think we've lost a little bit of that. Times change. Also, we didn't have an MMA show, on the same network 1 hour later to compare it to. But I was trying to put out there, and I know this is an episode about Abdullah, but at that point, we're together.
Yes.
I think we were a very good tag team.
Absolutely.
I thought we had a good short-term feud coming off of it. And I just want to get across the point that I'm learning so much from Abdullah. I never take it for granted what any of these great stars want to lend to me, even if in my head I was like, okay, I'm hearing you. I'm going to hold on to that. This is the other side of my brain. I'm going to hold on to that because I don't know when I might never be able to use this, but I might be able to use it. And I'm never going to disregard anything that anybody says to me, but I've also got to have a filter that feels things out and says, this works for me. And you lay it out there and you hope you're right. And you also hope that when you fail, which we all do, that you're in an atmosphere that understands you don't hit Titanic home runs without striking out once in a while. So.
Well, that interview you did with the birthday cake is a top 10 favorite of mine for yours, because it's such a great line and it feels like it's out of a movie.